Hey everyone, it's Zara and I'm back to film my reading journal for the month of May. I think we're already, 11 days into June, so it's going up a little late, but better late than never. In terms of my reading, it definitely slowed down near the end of May. It's been a slow start to June too. I haven't finished filling out where I'm at so far in June, but definitely a lot of, just trying to read for 15 minutes before bed, and oftentimes kind of falling asleep and not making it very far in my books. So hopefully that I can find other times to read, because obviously before bed is just not working for me at the moment, but still managed to read every day in May. And then looking at my overview for the month, 8 books total. My favorite book was One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I read roughly 2 books per week, so that was good. Mostly audiobooks, some physical books, and then only 1 Kindle book. I pulled a quote from XOXO Cody. "You are fabulous, but not everyone is going to like you. That's okay." No new releases really stood out to me this month. And then I finished everything I started besides Throne of Glass, which I'll hopefully be finishing shortly here in June. My top priorities were reading each day, which I did. I started Throne of Glass. I did not read my book of the month, so again, hopefully reading at least a book of the month in June would be preferred, because I keep accumulating them and I haven't been reading them very fast. But otherwise, I pulled some prompts from the back challenges in my planner and got most of them done that I was trying for. So then looking at my Goodreads tracker, again, like I said, mostly audiobooks, 2 physical books, and then 1 Kindle book. 8 books puts me kind of at the lower end for monthly reading. I think June is going to be, at this rate, it's going to be lower than 8, so we'll see how things go, but still 8 books is good. And then I have my bookshelves from JoJo's Pretty Paper Shop that I color in. I am on track to be close to the halfway mark of 50 books by the end of June, so halfway through the year. And then, hopefully I'll be reading 100 books by the end of the year. If I don't make 100, it's not a huge deal. It's just fun to set a goal, and if I make it, I make it. If I don't, I have a lot of other things going on, so I can't be upset if I, fall short. Then getting into what I read this month, I had some books that I really, really enjoyed, and then I had some books that I really didn't enjoy. I either really liked it or I really didn't like it, it felt like. So first off, I started with some books that I didn't enjoy. Icebreaker was the first one. This was my romance that I read this month. You have an ice skater and a hockey player, Anastasia and Nate, and they go to the same college, and because of some vandalism, one of the ice rinks ends up getting shut down for the semester, and they end up having to share. So they're around each other a lot, waiting for their turn on the rink, and they get to talking, they get to hanging out, and, a relationship goes from there. It was just too much sex. It was just a sex-driven plot. There wasn't as much plot as I would have liked. And then some of the things that did come up in the plot were a little too heavy for the book, or I felt like they were a little too heavy for the book. Like, there were things that came up about, not necessarily like an eating disorder, but, kind of some fat shaming and, kind of verbal abuse, and which maybe led to like an eating disorder or disordered eating. And then, there were some other things that came up that just kind of felt, I don't know, just not my favorite. And overall, I found myself, just not really caring about, you know, a lot of the more romantic parts of the book because it just was so much, too much. You know, there wasn't any sort of having to like wait for things or build up for things because it was just, you know, they start having sex and then there's sex through the whole book and there's sex at the end and there's, you know, it was just too much. Too much. So I only gave it 2 stars. Not my favorite. It's a series. I don't need to read more. Then I have The Only Survivors. This one was a thriller, and this one was just boring to me. I felt like it was a very slow building thriller. I didn't really understand what the main point of contention was. It took me a really long time to figure out kind of what I was supposed to be waiting for or what reveal was going to come at the end, because it really didn't feel like there was a lot of build up, even though like the whole plot was basically building up. It felt more of like a drama or just a regular fiction, and then there was kind of a reveal at the end that, you know, I guess could be something, but I don't know, it just, yeah. So with The Only Survivors, back in high school, 2 vans crash on a field trip, or 2 buses crash on a field trip. They fall off a cliff into the water, and I don't know, like half the people die, and then there's, I think, 9 survivors. The remaining 7 survivors are meeting up for their yearly kind of week-long trip that they take at the same time each year in remembrance of the crash, and, you know, to spend time with one another, etc. And again, it was just a really slow moving book, slow moving plot, and I just couldn't really understand what we were moving to. Then when they did the reveal at the end, and, you know, kind of the takeaways for why it was, I don't know, a thriller or contentious, or what the issue was, I have differing opinions on how I think, you know, like some of the things that the characters thought were problems, I don't think are problems. And without spoiling the ending and just telling you about it, I'll leave it at that. But I don't know, there were just things that I didn't, it felt like a non-issue, even though apparently it was an issue with the characters. And some of the reveal was kind of ridiculous. So 2 stars. I don't know, I'm trying to think if I have other, I think I have a different Megan Miranda book on my bookshelf, and I'm not going to be rushing to read it because I didn't totally enjoy this one. Then I have Absent in the Spring. This one I did enjoy, thankfully. It took me a while to get through, but again, it was a physical book, and I just wasn't devoting enough time to really getting into the book, and so I didn't therefore pick it up as much because I had other things that I was reading as well. But once I really sat down to read a big chunk of it, I really enjoyed it. So for Absent in the Spring, you're following Joan. She is traveling back from Iraq, where she was visiting her daughter, and to get to home in England, she has to take a car from wherever her daughter lives to this train station, rest house, kind of hotel, and then she takes the train. Well, she ends up, because of weather, making it late to the train station, misses her train, and then the next train is delayed because of the weather. And so she ends up being the only patron at this rest house, and she has all this time to herself to basically reflect on her life, which she doesn't do a lot of. She's not really a woman who spends time self-reflecting. She doesn't leave herself with a lot of just free, uninterrupted, alone time. And so, you know, now that she has this time, it's kind of overwhelming because she's realizing things about herself or thinking about past interactions with other people and how she treated them, or how scenarios went or situations went, and maybe things that she should have done differently, or things that now she's seeing in a different light. And she's just realizing things about herself or other people that, might be a little bit uncomfortable. So I don't remember if I said this. It's written by Agatha Christie, but obviously it's not a mystery, and it was actually written under a pseudonym. So it was written under Mary Westmacott. And Agatha Christie had 6 novels that she wrote under this pseudonym. And essentially it was her way of exploring other types of genres and other types of writing without having, her name attached to it, and people's, conceptions of, well, this isn't a mystery, or I like her mysteries better, to just kind of go into it with, just her as, letting the writing speak for itself, so to speak, not having her name as the author attached to it. And obviously now we know who wrote them, because this was written maybe the 40s, I think. I think it was around World War II. And so I really enjoyed this. Like I said, it took me a little bit to get into it, and I think part of that was my fault, because I was trying to pick up like 10 pages here, 15 pages there, and it wasn't until I read, like 50 pages or more in one chunk that I really got into it, because you kind of need those bigger bites for this story. But 4 stars, really enjoyed it. Want to read the other 5 books that she wrote. They're unrelated to one another, I believe, but I think that she's just a good writer is what this establishes. Next, we have One Perfect Couple, and this is by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware is one of my favorite thriller mystery, authors, and I guess just thriller, not really mystery. And this was her new book from last year. And in One Perfect Couple, you have Lila and Nico. Nico is an aspiring actor. Lila is a scientist, and Nico convinces Lila to go on this reality TV show with him, and it's called One Perfect Couple, and it's different couples competing, for basically the prize of who's the best couple. And he thinks that it's going to be his breakout if he, basically, shows his personality on air and makes himself a very likable character that people are rooting for at home. That'll open up opportunities for him and his acting career, because it's kind of been stagnant. He's not been a very successful actor up until this point. And so he convinces her to go on the show with him, since obviously she's his girlfriend. And the first day of the show, after arriving at the island, a huge storm strands them on the island. They are disconnected from communications back to the main island. A lot of their resources are destroyed or washed away. And so, it kind of becomes, desert island kind of survival story. And it also is, you get certain reveals, or you start learning more about some of the other people in these couples. And, there's also some contention between the different characters as well. So really enjoyed it. I just thought it was different. I liked the concept. I wanted to keep reading it, so I gave it 5 stars. Next, I have XOXO Cody. And if you are familiar at all with Peloton, he's one of the Peloton instructors that's very popular. And this is just his memoir about his life. I didn't know much about his life or him, other than I enjoy taking his rides. He has, kind of an upbeat personality. He has a lot of one-liners. He's kind of a fun one to watch. And when I'm exercising, I would like to be distracted, and he's a great choice for that. But it was interesting learning more about his life, how he was growing up really poor, and, how he dealt with kind of his past and you know, growing up poor, you know, kind of surviving, and then obviously now he's doing really well with himself, how he became a Peloton instructor, how he took opportunities that were given to him, how he looked for you know, opportunities, how he was in the right place at the right time. I found it funny. I laughed a lot. I learned a lot, and you know, overall it just kind of had like a feel good vibe with the book. So 4 stars. Then I read another low rated, I read The Club, and this is another thriller that just kind of lost me. I didn't enjoy it. It's about an exclusive resort that, you know, celebrities and other people pay for a membership to use this resort, and they have different locations all around, and there's some party at this particular resort. I think it was like a grand opening, but then at one part of the book they were talking about visiting the island 20 years before and wanting to build the resort on it. So then I got confused as to if it was a grand opening or not. But essentially, you know, it's a super exclusive party, and not everyone that is a member of the club can even go to the party. I don't know. So it just was a kind of a confusing setup anyways. I still don't really know exactly what all the setup was about or the back story, you know, setting it up. But on the night of the party, there's a car accident on the island and some people die, and then obviously you're trying to figure out, you know, kind of what happened, and you go back and forth trying to unfold what happened and who was affected. There were too many characters in this novel, way too many. It was hard to keep track of them all. I don't even think I kept track of them all. Some of them just blended together, and honestly didn't make a difference for the most part in my understanding of the book, because they were so similar. You know, you have multiple celebrities that all feel the same. Then you have multiple employees that all feel the same. Then you have, you know, the owner and his brother that felt kind of the same. There are too many perspectives. I just didn't care about the characters. I didn't like the characters. You know, there were too many reveals and like sub stories. So, you know, some of them were a little bit shocking, which is maybe why I gave it a 2 stars. Could have given it a 1 as well and felt good with that rating. So really just did not care about it. Won't think about it probably after this video again. Moving on, I have Finlay Donovan Digs Her Own Grave. This was the newest installment in the Finlay Donovan series. It came out, I think, in April, maybe. And Finlay Donovan's neighbor the cops find a body in her yard, and she is brought in for questioning, released back, but something happens with her house and she can't move back into it. I can't remember if it was like a burst pipe or they turned off the heat or something to that effect. And so until she gets it figured out, you know, and gets the repairs done, she says that she's moving in with Finlay. And this neighbor is, you know, kind of your nosy older neighbor, old lady with plenty of time on her hands kind of figure. And Finlay is not enjoying having her in her house. They're not even that good of friends. So it's, you know, basically the lady invites herself into Finlay's house. And so Finlay decides that she's going to solve the mystery, and then her neighbor can move back into her house and leave Finlay alone. So I enjoyed it. I mean, 4 stars. They kind of feel the same, you know, all of the Finlay Donovans, but they're enjoyable. They're, you know, easy reading, easy mysteries. So, you know, and I enjoyed it. Then the last book I read was The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. This I read with my husband. We listened to it as an audiobook, and it takes place in a Pennsylvania town in the 30s, I believe. And one part of the town is Chicken Hill, and you have the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store that's run by a Jewish woman named Shona. And then you have her husband who owns some theaters in town. And then you have, other kind of immigrant families, Black families that are in this area. And then there's like another part of the town that's all white. And so Chicken Hill is kind of the, I don't know, like less desirable or more, poorer part of the town. And the story unfolds slowly through all the different perspectives. And I'll say, what the club didn't do well with having too many characters that felt the same. The Heaven and Earth grocery store really had great character building. There's still a lot of characters in it, but it was easy to differentiate between them. I liked the way the story unfolded. You'd hear about a character and you'd think that they were just going to be kind of a small side character. And then, a couple chapters later, you'd have a perspective from that character and you'd learn about them more, learn about their backstory, and then, and then continue on kind of with the story and piecing it together and moving the plot forward. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. You have all sorts of different kind of racism and bigotry and, prejudices that different characters have towards one another or towards different ethnic groups or towards different subsets of people. And then, it'll be interesting, hearing one person talk about another character, and then, a couple chapters later, you hear that person, how their thoughts reflect back towards the person that, you heard from a couple of chapters before, if that makes sense. And, it just is interesting to hear it, because even some of the white characters, like the doctor, for example, he's the doctor, but he has a limp because I can't remember what was wrong with his leg. And then, so he has kind of this disability that puts him in a similar circumstance as Shona, who has a limp as well, but she's Jewish. And, but then, so obviously he thinks that he's better than her, even though they're very similar, and, and they have different experiences and stories and how their life unfolds and, where their paths take them. She is basically, helps everyone. They talk about how the Heaven and Earth grocery store doesn't make very much money because she just gives everyone credit and never asks for them to pay it back. Whereas, he is the doctor in town and he is a member of the KKK. And so, I don't know, it was such an interesting story. I enjoyed all of the characters, even the characters that you didn't enjoy. They were well written, and you could see some of their perspectives of maybe why they grew up to be that way or why they thought a certain way, and I enjoyed it. So I gave it 5 stars. Definitely, worth checking out sometime. I think this one won like the Barnes & Noble Book of the Year award a couple of years ago, which is what put it on my radar originally. But yeah, definitely worth a read. So anyways, that was everything I read in the month of May. Better late than never. And I will see you back in just a couple of weeks to talk about June. See you later.